Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Designing Robust Market and Competitive Intelligence Platforms. This webinar is hosted by Comintelli, who provides competitive and market intelligence solutions to customers worldwide to help them turn data into insights so they can make better business decisions. Please note that you all are muted, but if you have any questions, you can simply use the questions function at the bottom of your screen, and we'll answer all the questions at the end. I can also let you know that the webinar is being recorded and you'll get all the recording in a couple of days. The presenters today are GabrielAnderbjörk, CEO of Inzyon, and Jesper Martell, CEO of Comintelli, and they've just launched the book Guardians of Intelligence together. I'm handing over it to them so they can let us know more about themselves.
Hey everyone, thanks a lot for joining today and welcome to this session. We're going to be speaking about our new book, Guardians of Intelligence. It's something that we've had in the back of our minds for many, many years now. So it's almost unreal to actually be holding it in our hands. The book Guardian of Intelligence is about designing robust digital market and competitive intelligence platforms, as the subtitle suggests. And by that, we mean that it's not something that you do for a short period of time. Making it robust means that it actually lasts not just a year or so, but this is something that lasts over time and actually improves and grows over time as well. And this book is based on more than 20 years of experience, both from our time back at Ericsson, but also from all the years that we've been working with this at Comintelli, with a whole mix of different companies, both small companies, large companies, companies in different industries, companies in different geographical locations. And what we've done with this book is really try to compile all that knowledge that we've learned over these years and try to find some of the common traits and common characteristics of the companies that we feel have succeeded the most with building a robust, sustainable CI platforms. And that has resulted in this book. And that's what we're going to be sharing with you today, some of the best practice lessons that we've learned. Obviously, it's very technology and tools flavored, I'd say. But we all know that technology and software in itself is not enough to build a successful CI operation. You need more than that. You need good sources and good people as well. So we'll be talking a lot about that. But before we go into that, let me introduce my co-author, GabrielAnderbjörk, who's standing next to me here. Gabriel and I have known each other since the mid-90s, I think.
94.
Oh, you know exactly the date and time. Almost. That scares me a little bit. But a long time. And we first met at Ericsson, and Gabriel was in fact the director of competitive intelligence back then. So he was the leader of the initiative that we did back then, working with competitive intelligence at the corporate strategy function there. Since then, we moved on. We co-founded Comintelli together as well, also many years ago, and worked a long time there. And then you left a couple of years ago to start your own company, Inzyon. Still not being able to leave completely enterprise intelligence and knowledge management. So you're still sort of in that area, but with a slightly different focus, I'd say, more on sustainability, corporate governance, and things like that. I would describe you as very much of an entrepreneurial person, very much a pioneer in things that you do, always with a curious and open mind. And also with a solid academic background to back it up. Gabriel has studied, he has a degree both in physics, but he also has an MBA from the London Business School. So welcome, Gabriel.
Well, thank you, Jesper. And Jesper entrusted me in introducing him as well. So as you already said, I mean, we've been working together since 1994. It's a heck of a long time. I just counted out there's 26 years. So we learned a lot together on this journey. Jesper, when we met, he had completed an MBA from the Stockholm School of Economics, and he also spent some time in Madrid, was it? On the Swedish Trade Council down there. And then our journey at Ericsson started. And Jesper was the one who built the Business Information Center, it was called at that time at Ericsson, the platform for managing all that information that we needed to bring into that process. And as you said, we co-founded Comintelli. And during all those years, I would say I don't know anyone else that has sort of gathered that experience as you have with this kind of platform building and platform management. It's been wonderful we're working together.
And now it's all in this little book.
It's all documented.
Everything I know is in here.
It should have been more than 500. No, and it's been wonderful. And I know that whatever that comes after this, you will keep developing and being a thought leader in the industry when it comes to platform development. So it's a pleasure working together still. And as Jesper said, I haven't really left entirely. We keep working together, but in different formats. So this is wonderful. And not to say working on the book together, which has been fantastic.
Thank you, Gabriel. Honored to be here. I think it could be worthwhile to start off, even though I know we have a super knowledgeable audience. I've seen some of the names. Some of the names I recognize have been doing this almost as long as we have. But I think it's still good to start by defining what we mean with market and competitive intelligence. So how would you go about doing that, Gabriel?
Well, I mean, fundamentally, it's a matter of gathering, managing, and analyzing information about a company's entire business environment, the business landscape, in order to understand what's going on out there. I usually compare it with, what do I see when I look out the window? I mean, that window has to be very large if we talk about a global company. And the purpose obviously boils down to driving decisions. It's a decision support in essence, driving decisions that will improve the competitive advantages and the competitive edge of the company.
I agree.
That's it.
Yep. Some people have also asked us why we wrote the book and why we wrote it now. I think, to be honest, this is something that we've been, as I said, thinking about for a long time. When we started out, there weren't really any books in this area that explained how to do it. And I think throughout these years, we've always had this thinking, and I think at least I've thought of it as almost common sense. This is what you need to do. But perhaps it's not so common after all. Because when you look at the different sort of books that are out there that write about market and competitive intelligence, a lot of them are more sort of describing what is competitive intelligence and why is it important, and these are the analytical methods that you should be using. But there is very little out there on how you actually implement technology for CI purposes, and that's the focus of this book.
And also, I mean, adding to that, what we wanted to bring into it is very practical aspects. I mean, as you say, the analytical part, but how do you build in the impact in the entire organization? And we're going to use a model later on in the book as well that's based on ITP, so it's information, technology, and people. And very often, what we've seen is that companies that embark on these sort of tracks choose one of them. I mean, you're happy, but we got lots of information, but yes, but how do you make that impact, that information having an impact on the decisions, as we just discussed in the definition? So practicalities.
Yep.
In a way that many other books, or I wouldn't say we haven't seen any books that have done that before. So that hopefully is where we bring something to the table. Yeah.
All right, let's start diving into the book a bit deeper and describe how we've structured it. So the book itself consists of 4 different parts. The first part is what we've called the wild-grown landscape. This is really the why part of the book, both in terms of why you need competitive intelligence. So it describes a lot about how the volume information, there's so much information out there. The speed of change is so quick. There's so many different formats of information that you have to manage. And because of all this, competitive intelligence is becoming more and more important. But the first part also deals about why competitive intelligence needs to change as well. Because of all this that's happening in the world, competitive intelligence also has to change and move with the changes in the world. It's no longer good enough to use the traditional approach where there was a small core unit working with competitive intelligence, serving a small management team, writing reports, doing everything very much in a sequential order. To really meet the new challenges in the modern world, CI has to adapt to that as well. So that's what the first part of the book is about.
And the second part that we've called Growing a Garden is really all about exactly what do we need to do in order to achieve this. And Jesper used the word change at least 3 times.
Yeah.
And I'm going to repeat that, because doing something like that, well, maybe not. Doing a project like this and implementing an operation and capability for marketing competitive intelligence is a change management project. And that is something one need to realize. It's not something that just happens overnight, but it's also something that needs to be working with all those different aspects we mentioned. So the second part of the book goes through the different steps, and each step is described in terms of the ITP and at least sort of the working progress towards each step.
Yeah, information technology
and people. Exactly.
Yeah. And then once we've laid that foundation in the second part, the third part really digs deeper into that. So a little bit more about information, how do you find relevant sources, how do you organize them, a little bit more about technology and what are some of the key features that you should be looking for, what are some of the uses of AI and machine learning that are connected to competitive intelligence, people side of things, how do you build a community of people who collaborate, and how do you motivate them to actually use a tool, etc. So really digging a bit deeper. This is the, I'd say, the bulk part of the book. And today we won't be going into those details, but if you read the book, you'll get more hands-on practical guidance.
I'd like to add to that, because I just come to think of it. Reading the book is one thing, but working with the book is a different one. And I think the way you would work with the book is that you work with the second part, as we talked about, and then you iterate with the third part, because all these different parts in the third section sort of builds up or digs deep into what the second part advises you to do in terms of actions. And finally, we have something that we call Beyond the Garden Walls. And that is really, what can you now do with this? What do you want to do with the capability that you've built? You've made the change management project. You have trained people. You have invested in technology. You have made sure that the information is there. Now, what can you do more over what you've already sort of done on the different steps we're going to talk? It's about making a company healthier. It will improve the bottom line. It will improve your sort of prediction capability and what's going to happen tomorrow. And of course, continue answering the key question of all: where are we heading? What's going on in our industry? Where should we be in the future?
Yeah. And connecting CI to that, of course, in all those aspects. All right, so now the time is to go into the actual model, the Guardians of Intelligence model, and I'll give you a quick overview of this. It consists of 5 phases that you go through and 5 levels. So really starting from the bottom, we have the locating phase, and then once you've understood that you want to work with this, you move to seeds, and you plant your seeds, so they start growing into sprouts, and you cultivate them and irrigate them. They turn into sprouts, and they start growing into plants, and then they start spreading into flower beds, moving on up, burgeoning, hopefully into what's it called? The fifth part, the shrubberies. Sorry, the shrubberies. New word for me. And then harvesting the blooming garden. Yeah. Just a side note on that. When we decided on this model, we thought about gardening very much, and you'd be surprised how many websites there are about gardening and how much I've been learning about different types of gardens during this process. But that's aside. The key point I'd like to make here is this is not really a sequential process. It's not something you have to do sort of step by step in this specific order. In fact, what we've seen is that most companies jump a bit back and forth. So it is really like sort of leveling into different levels. Some people start with sprouts, and then they hop up and they start doing other things, and then they might come back down, depending on maybe who's there. If a person leaves or someone goes in and sort of stamps out some of the sprouts that have started growing, you have to start again, etc. So it really is a sort of iterative process, this going a bit back and forth. And actually, also to give you some behind the scenes information on this, when we built this model, we were sort of thinking about Super Mario. Remember that?
Yep.
And sort of jumping between different levels and trying to sort of progress all the time. And all the struggles that you encounter if you're a Super Mario in this whole process. But I think we ended up, and it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun, but this was more serious. But I think for the audience, maybe sort of think in those terms, you sort of go back and forth, and you have lots of challenges, and you have to sort of start and restart to progress. And that's the whole idea behind this.
I think one thing I would like to add to that, which is, by the way, 6 steps.
Yeah,
not 5.
Sorry,
yeah. Just not to confuse the audience. But that is also that these different steps that we have defined are there. It's not by coincidence. These are levels, if you like, where you can actually pause. You can land there for some time.
That's a good point.
And I mean, if you're at the sprouts is actually even though it's just the second level, you really have made a progress from not having anything. Yeah. Huge progress. But the thing is, as we said, this takes time. It takes grit. Sometimes you need to rest.
Yeah. No, and sometimes I think it's fine. I mean, I'm not saying even if you have sprouts, it's at least something. It's better than having just a pile of soil.
Absolutely.
So for some companies, it's good enough, and you're at least getting some value.
Oh, yeah. So it might even suffice.
Yeah, so exactly. Yeah. And then moving on from this, going a bit more into detail, each of these phases has a number of frameworks that we call information technology people.
And as you will see when we come to the following slides, each phase is described in terms of what do you need to do when it comes to information technology and people. Some of those phases are more heavy on information and people, others are extremely heavy on technology, and you will follow the logic when we go through that. But these 3 components, if you like, of building the capability of MCI has to develop in one way or the other in parallel. You can't just rely on people without technology information. You can't rely on information without technology making it useful for people, etc. So they really have to interact. And I would say there is also where we're seeing quite some companies that sort of try to develop one of the capabilities quicker than the others. And because of that, fail in that particular attempt, which is then a backlash in the project. So hopefully this can serve as a guiding.
Yeah, that's really all 3 have to work together. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So with that sort of base, we've sort of described the Guardians of Intelligence levels and phases, and each of these consists of information technology and people components. Now we're going to go through, this is probably the main slide that we'll show today. This is a bit of the things, a bit more practical, what you do in each of these 6 different phases. And I'll start with number 1. Number 1 is we've called it locating, and then seeds is the level that you reach. And really here, you're not really actually doing that much, except realizing that you need competitive intelligence. So often companies in this phase, they've experienced something, some sort of disruption or some change or some competitor move that has made them realize that, oh, we need to know more about this area. And we need to develop a competitive intelligence function. And so you're really starting to map out what you have today. Do we have any information about competitors? Do we have any reports about what customers are doing or new technologies? Who is working with this within the company? Starting to sort of just figure out what's in place. And then you have a couple of seeds in your pocket that you want to place somewhere. Typically here, you start sort of forming a team. It's not in place yet, but I think perhaps the most important thing in this phase is to try and find a sponsor. And we were very lucky when we were back at Ericsson because we found a super sponsor who really had our back when we were doing this, because this was all new at Ericsson back in those days. And I think the key learning from there is to have a sponsor with you, but also be super, super clear on what the purpose is with competitive intelligence. And why are we doing this? And who is the target group? Who's going to use this information? That's actually something that we've seen in the CI programs that fail is because they aren't clear on the purpose and they're not clear on why they're doing this. And this is typically something that you set in this early phase here. So And then moving on from this, so once you've decided that this is something we need to do, we plant some seeds, we get some plants that start growing. This is typically perhaps the most visible part of your whole journey when things actually start coming out of the CI department. This is when you build your first software platform, software tool, and there's something in place. This is when you have some sort of a structure, you start organizing your information and which topics are important, key intelligence topics, which competitors, which technologies, which markets do we want to monitor, and that gets put in here. There's a small sort of core team that's put in place here that are starting to work with this. All these little bits of components start being built here. And I think this is where you can see some really quick wins as well. In the organizations that succeed with this, they can quite quickly show some sort of value from competitive intelligence very early on. Often it's quite in a quite simple format. It's enough if you maybe put together a weekly competitor newsletter that you send out every Friday, and you have a good distribution list so that people see that something is happening. That's sort of the first, this first step. And again, this might be good enough for a lot of companies, but at least they're monitoring and tracking what's happening in the market. And then if you have this in place, the next step is really sort of cultivating this and making it grow more.
It is, because you have your sprouts in place.
Yeah.
And I want them to grow. And if you look at the slide now, you will see on the ITP charts that there was essentially nothing on the people component on the two previous ones. Exactly. Whereas now there's almost nothing on the technology. And that is for the simple reason you now have your technology platform in place. So now we need to sort of nurture the capability that's been put in place. There's still a lot of information, so we will continue working with adding new type of information sources. We're moving a little bit away from just open sources to more professional sources. We're bringing in internal sources into the system, but first and foremost, we're now focusing on engaging a much wider community of users and interested parties in the organization, not just by sending out information, but also making them, as we call them in the book, observers. People who hear and see things on the market. These could be people from sales, product development, anyone who experience what is happening and bring that into the framework you have put in place in phase 1 and phase 2. Hopefully, the user number grows tremendously, and this is also a way for you to get much more impact. As we said in the beginning, the purpose of systems like this and projects like this is to make sure that you drive decisions throughout the company that will improve the competitive edge of your operations. And this is the step where that should start to be seen.
Yep. Now, and hopefully this process continues. So your plants, they start spreading now into and sort of build flower beds as well in part 4. And this is where now, as you said, usage of what you have is starting to grow. But now it becomes a bit more complicated. This is a great result if you've reached this far. But now that you have more users, you will actually get more requirements as well. People won't be satisfied with just a weekly news report. So you'll be wanting to start to add more functionality to your tools, maybe trying to customize the output of competitive intelligence a bit more. So that not everyone receives the same newsletter. You can get sort of a bit more.
That gets too generic.
Exactly. Yeah. So you have to sort of have custom alerts, custom dashboards, and maybe reaching out to new user groups through mobile interfaces, things like that, making sure that it spreads even more and that you get more people involved as well. So now we're starting to reach the phase where it's not just for the CI analysts, but for all decision makers. And that's what you're trying to accomplish in this phase, to sort of broaden the scope and getting it ingrained in other work processes as well.
Yeah. Well, if you come to this point, you've really done a tremendous job already. I mean, we have to say that. I mean, then you already have a capability, and the value added in each of those 4 steps has been tremendous. Now,
and I'd say few companies reach sort of this, just to be clear on that, this is not sort of something that everyone does. I'd say most companies are in 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
So now if you're up here, congratulations.
Yeah, exactly. And if we now move into the burgeoning phase and you want to go for the shrubberies level. The difference really from before, as you see now, we're back to people and technology, very little information. And actually, those of you who are particularly interested in sourcing of information, working with professional sources and internal sources, you're almost set by leaving stage 4. What we're now talking about is making sure that this capability really gets embedded in other types of operations and processes in the company. So APIs, for instance, sharing and collaboration platforms that might not be this platform, but that you integrate with, make sure that every single individual can access this from their particular working environment. So it's really about people and technology to connect.
And embedding CI in the entire company's ecosystem, really.
But exactly, and that comes a little bit in the next step. We can actually move on to the harvesting as well, because as you will see here, now we left the information and technology completely behind. Here comes the major people, i.e. also change management aspect of this, where we want to bring the entire thinking of MCI into every single decision process. And I usually take an example or take an analogy with when quality systems were implemented many years ago. I mean, when we started working, I mean, there was a quality guy somewhere in the basement. He came up and walked around and made a quality system.
I remember him.
And yeah, it's actually, we're thinking about the same chap. He was nice though. But then quality was assured. And as everyone knows, I mean, that is something that has during the years been implemented in every single process. And you have all the ISO standards and everything. And we believe that we're heading in the same direction when it comes to MCI. A sales team or a marketing director shouldn't need to reach out to the CI department and get advice 2 weeks prior of sending out a proposal. It should be embedded in the entire sales process. It should be embedded in the product development process. And that is really what we're going for in this harvesting phase. So that's a long-term thing. Having reached shrubberies, going from shrubberies into the blooming garden, it will take some time, but it's definitely worth it.
And as we said, each of these phases are described in more detail in the book. And here we're just describing, giving you an overview of the process and our experiences of going through this and how other companies have done it as well. But as we said, you can sort of jump a bit back and forth between these steps. But this is, I think, a recommended way or a best practice way with the companies that we've seen that have reached the furthest in this. All right, so some of the conclusions that we've drawn then from this work are really two things.
Yeah, we can start with one, and that is, believe it or not all information is available on internet. Trust me. You know that. Yeah. So, I mean, you have open sources. Yes, you have professional sources. And I mean, this is one thing we keep talking about. Mix the open with professional sources, because open sources, it takes you only so far, and that's the bottom line. And when we mean professional, you're about to say something, that's clear.
Yeah, no, I'll
go ahead.
No, I'm just thinking, I agree completely.
Yeah.
It's sort of, you have to be able to, or you should be prepared to pay for content.
Yes.
But not just external content. I'm thinking more much about the internal.
I was on my way. Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely. So I mean, essentially, people talk about internal and external content, but and for some reason, we still meet companies that see those two as completely different. They treat them in different systems. They treat them differently. Whereas both are, of course, there to be used for the MCI sort of purpose. And in order for that to work, you simply have to work with them in the same system. So it's all a question of managing those different type of sources in the same environment and treating it similarly.
Yeah. Well said.
Thank you.
The second key takeaway that we have, that we sort of point out very much in the book, has to do with what we call monitor and discover. And here we see that some companies, they start off by being a bit too short-sighted, a bit too much focus sort of on the left-hand side of the picture here on what's happening today, which is fine. It's nothing wrong with that, but you shouldn't stop there. Sometimes, I mean, just looking at what has happened in the news in the past and writing newsletters about that is almost a bit like sort of driving your car and looking through the rearview mirror. You're looking at things that have already happened, and that doesn't really help you make decisions about the future. So we make a point in the book about the sort of discovery side of things, trying to be a bit more strategic in your thinking as well. trying to use tools and processes to be able to identify not only what has happened, but try and sort of predict what might happen. So this has to do with things like scenario planning, finding early warning signals, and really trying to be more prepared for any future disruptions. And because that's, I think, where CI really has a value. And that's when you build something that is hard to copy and hard for someone else to do. So that's a point that we emphasize in here as well. Do monitor, by all means, that's the foundation, but CI should be much more focused on forward, future-looking discovery issues as well.
Those of you who've seen the book might have read the back page, and it starts with, when future knocks on the door, it never walks away. And I think that is exactly where we're at here. I mean, it's let's be prepared for that knock on the door, exactly. And make sure we know what to do when
it happens. Yeah, exactly. Good. I think hopefully you have an overview there. We're happy to sort of take any questions if there are any questions.
Yes.
Feel free to do that.
Let's see if we have any questions here. Yes, the first question is, in your experience, how much time and resources will it take to create a garden?
Okay. Bottom line, it will take time. And I think that is a key message in the book. And that is why we also built those 6 different steps. You need to realize it will not go for 1 month, 2 months. It will take years to go through all these different steps. Just the evaluation phase of what tools you need, what information, etc., typically goes out for a number of months. Then, of course, it's very much dependent on where are you already. There might be capabilities in the company that can already be utilized in order to sort of speed up the process of one of the phases or 2 of the phases, but it does take time. And on average, going from, let's say, 1 to 4, leaving 5 and 6, because that is, it can take a long time, somewhere between a year to 2.
Yeah, I agree completely.
We have another question here. Which tools would you recommend for usage by entry-level CI functions and professionals?
The 2 months.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think, and obviously I'm a bit biased here, but I think in general, I think anything is better than nothing. So if you are using Google Alerts today and compiling newsletters in a Word document and then emailing them out to people, that's sometimes good enough. That's a good starting point. But to be more specific, I'd recommend that you actually find a sort of a CI tool that is specifically designed to do competitive intelligence, something that takes all of these factors into consideration and that has been purpose built for this, and not try and build something on your own. That's sort of a general independent piece of advice, I'd say. And also, I think the other thought I was thinking is try and be not too short-sighted. Try and think a bit about scalability as well, so that you find a tool that allows you to grow as you grow through this through these different phases and levels. We've seen some examples with companies who start with a tool that might be very good when you're just a plant, but when you reach sort of higher levels, then you're sort of stuck in something that can be hard to get out of sometimes.
Such as frameworks already built into the system that is not sort of changeable. There's a number of different sort of loopholes that might in the beginning look convenient, if you put it that way, but that might sort of have a backlash.
So maybe flexibility is a key word here. When
flexibility, scalability,
for tools.
Integratability maybe as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. We have another one. In what ways can AI machine learning improve CI workflows? What AI tools could be leveraged to do CI?
Well, that's a question we get very, very often. And there's a lot of talk about AI and machine learning, at least in what we're still doing. And I think sometimes people have too high expectations on AI and machine learning. I'm sorry to say that there is no sort of magic AI tool that will solve all your intelligence problems automatically without you having to think 1 single second. That would be fantastic, but it's not out there. And I think people look at sort of tools like Netflix and Amazon and Spotify. And here AI does really work well, but it works well because there's such a huge volume of users and documents that AI can work on, and people are interacting with the content. Then AI works really well. But to be honest, I haven't seen a lot of cases in sort of AI in a corporate environment, because especially not in a CI environment, because there you have such a low number of users and documents that it makes it hard for AI.
Yeah.
To really deliver.
And what is also very often sort of, when you discuss the AI in corporate world, it becomes very clear it has to be extremely specific. I mean, the question at hand should be very, very targeted. Yeah. And CI is not that targeted. You want to look at your entire environment. Yeah. So it's really tough. Yeah. Yeah.
That said, I mean, some of the things that have worked, I think, and that we have seen good examples is, for example, using AI for classification purposes, automatically categorizing content. There's some good examples of clustering, seeing how documents relate to each other. AI is quite good at sort of converting both audio and video into text. There's sort of AI-based summaries. These sort of a bit more, I'd say, mechanical functions do work well.
Absolutely. And one part of the application area that I like with AI engines in the MCI field is also those picking up on signals that you haven't thought about.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, very often we get the question, can a system or can a model tell me what I need to know that I didn't know I needed to know, which is really, a very tough part, because you don't know that you asked the question. Yeah. Their AI, parts of it can actually help.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Any other questions or comments before we start wrapping things up?
We have one more. What is the magic behind the scenes to reach relevant results for Discover? This seems to compete with the approach of trend scouting.
Well, I can try and do a stab on that. I mean, what tools can do at least is help you discover things in the content that you're monitoring that may not be sort of a defined topic, may not be something that one of your main competitors, but suddenly tools can help you discover that there's a lot of activity, there's a lot being read or a lot being published about this company all of a sudden, and it seems to relate to this other company. Things like that tools can be used to find, but then to deduce what that actually means for you is a completely different story.
Finding changes in patterns, which is just the fact that there is a change.
Something is sticking out.
Then someone has to sit down and think about it.
Yeah, why is it changing? Exactly. And how does that impact? But finding this sort of,
Yeah, definitely. And that is not a thing you do manually, because you have really to sift through giants amount of data in order to do that. But having those small alerts that now something is changing.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you, but we have one more.
Okay.
Based on your long experience in the industry, can you share some advice on how to secure buy-in for a CI function from leadership, besides being clear on the purpose, where to start, and which are some low-hanging fruits?
Yeah. Well, I can have a go, and you can work again. But I mean, there's a couple of things that you can do to provide value. One, of course, is that, especially in the beginning, and this is something we used at Ericsson as well, but you can actually show that you save costs by doing this, by really centralizing all information in one place. That's usually a very easy win in the beginning, and it's quite easy to measure as well, to get through. The other thing that I think is important in the beginning is that you actually get information and you can show that people are using it. Just by the fact that people are subscribing to your email alerts indicates some sort of value. That's a simple way of doing it as well, of sort of proving the value of competitive intelligence. Those are two things that come to mind immediately. I don't know if you have anything you'd like to add to it.
It depends, of course, on what kind of industry you're in. But one example I often take, even before we come to being able to show the value, to put it that way, you're up there with the decision making, saying I need a budget. If you can sort of argue along the line that, let's say you're in a manufacturing company of some sort where you sell reasonably sized projects or machineries or whatever, there's always a gross margin on a new deal. And if you can, by some calculations, show, which is very likely when it comes to CI, that the cost of your program is actually less then one new deal margin, gross margin, you pretty much done it. And I know that because I've seen it work. So it's a practical experience of how you can argue for the value of CI.
Yeah.
Thank you. We don't have any more questions.
All right. Well, then we have one final fun part to do for someone who is lucky enough to be attending the webinar today. I don't know if you've managed to draw some lucky names for people who will be actually receiving a copy of this book.
Yes, I did. And we have the first name here. Let's see. Lena Olofsson.
Lena Olofsson. She's at Essity, I think. Congratulations to you.
And then Heidi Ahola.
Heidi, also congratulations to you.
Karsten Blow.
Karsten Blow. Which company, do you know? No?
Congratulations to Karsten.
Congratulations to Karsten.
Mohammad Nesrini.
Mohammad Nesrini, also a book on its way to you.
And then
the final
one. We have Juliana Margis.
Juliana, also a book on its way to you. And I think what we'll be doing, we'll be reaching out to the names that we just mentioned, and we'll ask you for a way that we can send the book in the most convenient way to you. So thanks a lot for listening from us. I'm happy to answer any questions if you think of anything later on. We're available.
Yes, and our email addresses are on the screen, as you can see. So take note of them, and we're happy to be there.
Yeah, and on LinkedIn as well.
Yes, thank you everyone for joining us, and we will send you the recording in a couple of days. Thank you.
Thank you.